Hello, Garland Nixon here, and things seem to be going rather in a difficult manner. I'll put it like that. They're having a difficult time on the front in Ukraine, which means that NATO is going to have some questions to answer real soon. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's get started. Let's start here. I do tell you, if you look at the bottom, you'll see my P.O. box, and I always get letters from people, requests from people. I get books from people. And one of our dear friends in Puerto Rico who retired sent me a patch and asked if I would hold this patch. Look at that. There we go. The Connecticut Department of Correction. So that's the patch for the Connecticut Department of Correction. Just so you'll know, I really do have a P.O. box, and every now and then I get something from people, well, fairly regularly. So P.O. Box 32, you'll see it at the end. If you want to send me anything, just a friendly letter, whatever, it doesn't matter, a patch from your job, a donation, anything is fine, except don't give me the Ted Kaczynski treatment. All right, let's get going. Let me get this blanked out so it doesn't screw with me. Sometimes with my other screen, if I have something on there, like catch my eye or whatever. Yeah, I'm an ADD guy. I'm all over creation. Anyway, let's get going. So what's happening? One of the things that I see going on right now in Ukraine, and as I always say, I don't get into the names of the towns. Petrovsk, I think I got that right. You got a V and an S and a K. Speak English. Those things kind of screw me up. You know what I mean? Now, Bologna, sure, it's pronounced Bologna, but I'm American. I know, okay, that's baloney, right? But when I see Petrovska, I'm like, screw it. What's happening there? Okay. Anyway, so what's going on apparently is this: the same thing that's happening in Petrovsk or whatever is happening all over creation in Ukraine. And why are my glasses so fogged up? Because as I see it, a while back I had Andrei Martyanov, and we were talking about the tactics, about the Russian way of fighting, and he used the Russian language. We'll never remember what it was, but basically what he said was exhaust the enemy. You exhaust the enemy. Now, I put it to you like this: as I see it, there's two ways, two things, two strategies I think that are simultaneously going on, and that there's a continuum of exhausting the enemy. Here's what I mean. I think the initial way of exhausting the enemy is just fighting the enemy and looking at the enemy and evaluating and saying, I can make shells and rounds and guns and tanks and things like that faster than my enemy and longer than my enemy, right? Now, keeping in mind, who's the enemy? Russia knows good and well they're fighting NATO. They know they're fighting the combined forces of NATO, who are using Ukraine as a proxy to go against war. That they're doing. They've come up with a different plan. Basically, I would say this is World War II, part two. In the first part, let's just say this: we started off with the French. 18, 12, 11, whenever it was, just said, let's go in and beat the hell out of the Russians. They got kicked back. I think that, you had the Crimean War, different things. You had Charles the 12th of Sweden. They just straight on, let's take on the Russians. Never worked out all that well. So when it came to Hitler, they built up this proxy force. Most people don't know Hitler. It was a proxy force. It was financed by the West. And the plan was they're going to take that, use this proxy army, this huge Nazi proxy army, and they're going to attack the Russians. The Russians beat that down. And I think now basically that's, part 2.0, right? We got a Nazi proxy army again with, interestingly enough, German tanks roaming along the Russian border. But we'll use this proxy army to go after Russia. But this time, as you know, I hate to sound like a broken record, the plan wasn't really to fight Russia. It was to get the war started against Russia and then to lay into Russia, to lay into Russia with all of these sanctions, to weaken Russia and to cause Russia to unseat Vladimir Putin, to put in some kind of a proxy sucker who was then going to, a traitor, Navalny, whoever the hell, and then that person was going to, just funnel all the resources to the West so they could continue to survive, and then they could go after China and all the evil things that they want to do. And when that didn't happen, when Russia didn't fall, they didn't have a backup plan. So they're like, well, I guess we'll just keep fighting. And then they had to make up narratives for themselves to believe. They had to have an internal conversation for themselves to believe. But at that point, they were stuck. And I'll put it like this. This war was lost when the sanctions didn't unseat Vladimir Putin and put in some compliant traitorous puppet. At that point, it was lost. At that point, they didn't have a backup plan. So it was, we'll come up with a narrative. We'll continue to propagandize the people and tell them the Russians are losing. They're fighting with shovels. They're running out of whatever. We'll blame everybody else. It's the Chinese. It's the North Koreans. It's Iranian. We'll do all of these things. But these were not actions. These were reactions. The action was to overthrow the government of Ukraine. The action was to arm Ukraine. The action was to get the war started, right? These were actions. These were things that they were moving ahead with. Then we're going to get the war started. Then the big action was the sanctions. Great. Russia's going to fall. When Russia didn't fall, they switched from actions to reactions. Now they have to react to the fact that that they're in a war with Russia. And the way they did it, the principal thing was propaganda. And let me tell you how you can tell that the principal thing was propaganda. Because everything's blue and yellow. Everywhere you go, everything in the West has been converted to the color of the Ukraine flag. You go to I was in New York City, I was in Jersey, all around there, a month or two, a couple months back. Every damn thing that I saw is the color of the Ukrainian flag. It just makes me sick. Around here, everywhere you go, particularly the blue states, everything. Go to Walmart. Walmart has literally changed their blue and yellow. They changed it, the blue, to the color of the Ukrainian flag. I was watching the NBA finals and they had the color of the Ukrainian flag. There's some, what is it? League. I forgot what teams were playing. Basically, some new league. I forgot whatever, soccer, whatever the hell they're playing. But both teams had blue and yellow uniforms. One was yellow and blue and the other's blue and, one yellow on blue, the other's blue and yellow. So the bottom line is this. Well, here's what we'll do. We'll make everything the color of the Ukraine flag. Well, I mean, from a narrative perspective, it works. The problem is this. The Russian plan remains the same. Make a lot of weapons, continue to fight, continue to put pressure on the Ukrainian military. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Continue to attack, continue to come up with new ways to attack, continue to expand your military capabilities, continue to train soldiers, continue to prepare, attack, prepare more people. Keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, right? And eventually you exhaust your enemy. So one of the things that we're seeing that's happening is, and what's interesting was a big help to this, interestingly enough, a big assistance, since this is in fact a world war, was the Iranian conflict, because the Iranian conflict did in fact weaken the US's ability to expand conflicts. It weakened them because their air defense missiles, their air defense capability was significantly weakened, and the world looked at them, and a lot of people who might have been afraid of the US were like, man, you guys ain't as tough as we thought. You got no air defense. You have no air defense. Essentially, in this day and age, the way air defense works, the US don't have them. We don't have air defense. I mean, let's face it, if somebody can just fire a bunch of dummy missiles and drones and take your air defense out and just overwhelm your air defense from day one and look at you and say, you know what, 10 or 15 days, you're completely out. I mean, if the US, let's face it, the US and Europe are like, okay, we're going to take on all of Russia. We're going to take on Russia. Okay, yes, they got a lot more people and all this kind of stuff, not in their military right now. But here's the problem they'd have. After about 2 weeks, they'd be pretty much out of it. Maybe even lesser time than that. They'd be pretty much out of air defense. And I don't mean running short. Their air defense doesn't work well. Think about these two things. Your air defense is not very capable, and you don't have enough air defense missiles to sustain a conflict. And that's important when we talk about the context of this whole NATO versus Russia, NATO versus China, right? The thing that's not discussed, it's discussed like how many aircraft carriers, how many missiles, how many this, how many that, right? But the operative phrase would be sustain the conflict, right? We saw Israel 12 days. And basically what we learned was if Iran was a few days, a few volleys away from Israel being naked, absolutely naked, no air defense whatsoever. And the U.S. would have and the U.S. was using theirs. They were using others. They had ships from all the various NATO countries, and they're all firing air defense stuff. Within weeks, the U.S. and its allies would have all been naked in the Middle East. They would have been exhausted of their air defense capabilities. And then what do you do? Think about this. What do you do if you get in a war with Russia and or China, and 2 weeks in, you're exhausted, you have no air defense capabilities, and you say, okay, time out. And Russia and China say, well, this is a war. You attacked us. You started it. Okay, well, then perhaps we should talk about, maybe a temporary, and they're like, you're out of air defense missiles. And what that means is we're not taking a break. We're firing twice as many as we did before, because every one of them's getting through, and you know it. You can now, we've got this nice little document here that says unconditional surrender. You could always sign that, or everything you have will be flattened. We're giving you 2 hours, 1 hour. We're giving you 1 hour to make a decision. Either you sign an unconditional surrender, or every base, every airplane, everything you have, Russia and China is going to vaporize it. And to be quite frank, if they got in a war with Russia and China, they wouldn't have to. I don't think they'd have 2 weeks. I don't think they'd have 2 weeks because, think about the capabilities China has. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of missiles. They could probably easily put 1,000 missiles on every base that the U.S. has in the first hour, which means every base would be gone in an hour. Everything would be gone in an hour at that point. The U.S. would not have a fighting force. Any ships, everything would have missiles come towards it. It'd be done. There wouldn't be a matter of exhausting them. Most everything that the U.S. has in the region in the Asian Pacific region would be flattened in hours. The only option would be to swallow a suicide pill and start throwing nukes, and then of course you're going to get destroyed. So is that really the plan? So my point being, right now, the U.S. has been exposed as being very, very weak. The U.S. empire, NATO, extremely weak. And what Russia is doing is making it even weaker by the day. It's putting pressure on Ukraine. And in a way, oddly enough, a lot of people may not agree with me, but I'll say this. If I'm Russia and China and Iran, to be frank, I'm hoping that Germany and Britain and France continue to send stuff to Europe, to Ukraine, and the US. If I'm Russia, I'm like, okay, we could crush them now. Shall we crush them? You're like the head general for Russia, and you call President Putin. President Putin, yeah, we got the Ukrainians right where we want them. Can we take them out? Putin, we go, hell no, you out of your mind? If we win this war, these morons are going to stop sending gear for us to blow up. I hear we're getting 6 or 7 Patriots. Here's what I want you to do. Keep the pressure on. Do not go over the top. Don't take them out. At least let them send these next 6 or 7 Patriots. We can blow them to hell. That's 6 or 7 less Patriots. In fact, here's what we're going to do. Here's a plan. We're going to say to the United States, we'll send a message specifically to Lindsey Graham, and we'll say, you better not send any more weapons. That's going to piss us off, especially no more Patriots and air defense systems. And then we're going to say, if Germany and Ukraine and France and doggone England, why if they send any more tanks and air defense systems, we're really going to be pissed. They better not do it. In fact, we're feeling kind of weak. Things aren't going our way. If the Germans and Netherlands, whoever the hell, the rest of these ignorant bastards, if they all sent a bunch of Patriot systems and all of their air defense systems all throughout Europe, it'd probably do the job and we'd lose. I think, in fact, we'd probably consider surrendering instantly if they were to send all of their air defense systems. So that's what we're going to go with that. Let's get that message out. We are finished if they send the air defense systems. We're going to turn tail and run. And hopefully these fools will send the rest of their stuff to Ukraine and we can blow it the hell up and be done with them. So that way, even if they get something in their mind that, hey, maybe we want to fight the Russians, they'll wake up and realize, oh, crap, what happened to all of our air defense systems? We already sent them to Ukraine and the Russians blew them up. Oh, tanks? Yeah, gone. How about mobile missile launchers and perhaps, I don't know, long distance artillery? Gone, sent to Ukraine, blown up. Oh, crap. So if I'm the Russians, I'm like, do I really want to stop this thing? I got a nice little system going here. These bastards are getting kind of froggy. They may think about giving me some problems in the future. Why don't I just go ahead and finish demilitarizing them? So I'm just saying, if I'm the Russians, I'm thinking about demilitarizing NATO. I don't want to end this thing. I want it to continue to go. I want NATO to send their money, their mercenaries, you got a good system going on for 3 years. Think about it, Russia. NATO sends in their stuff, you blow it up. They send in some mercenaries, the mercenaries get it. What's wrong with that? I mean, I'm not saying that I want this war to continue, because I don't. I don't want it to continue. I don't want any war to continue. But by the same token, if I'm the Russians and I can gain an advantage by letting these jackasses send everything they got into Ukraine so I can blow it up instantly, why you want to give that up? I'm not giving that up if I'm the Russians. Pretty good strategy. But meanwhile, what's going on now is, it appears to me, is the Russians, your initial strategy is what? It's a long-term strategy, right? It is keep the pressure on the Ukrainians. Let's build more drones, get more missiles, set them aside in case NATO gets froggy, and let's throw a lot of stuff at Ukraine, and let's just make their lives a living hell. Okay. But as circumstances change, your tactics change. As an example, a boxer, he's boxing and he gets in a good punch and he sees the guy on the ropes and the guy's trying to get himself together and the guy's disoriented. What's a boxer going to do? Is he going to continue the same strategy? He's changing punches with the guy. He's dancing around. He's moving in the strike. He's moving out. He's getting some body punches. He's trying to get points. He's got 12 rounds here and he wants to be able to win on points. But he gets an uppercut through whap and catches the guy and he sees the guy stumble and fall up against the rope. Is he still going to continue trying to point the guy? No. He's going to jump into him and try to knock him out and start throwing flurries. He's going to come in on the guy. The guy's weak. He wants to come in and start throwing flurries, right? That's what he wants to do. The guy's in trouble. Throw some flurries. Put him down, right? Whatever his strategy was, when he sees the guy get weak, that strategy changes. Here's my point. The Russians are working to exhaust the Ukrainians. But they recognize something, and that is the U.S. is sending a lot of stuff to Israel, ain't going to Ukraine. The U.S. is starting to complain, we're running out of stuff. The Europeans are like, we're getting a little short on money, and damn it, we've sent every damn thing to Ukraine. We're running out of stuff. And they went around the world, Pakistan, South Korea, Japan, whoever, give us your stuff, got to go to Ukraine. I mean, the Russians have really demilitarized the U.S. and all of their allies. We've been throwing stuff into Ukraine and they've been blowing it up for the last couple of years. Pretty good system, actually. But at any rate, now that there doesn't appear to be a lot of weapons left to go to Ukraine, and to be quite frank, the Trump administration doesn't have a great inclination to send stuff. I think, quite frankly, it appears they see it as a lost war. And Trump's perspective is he's not emotionally tied to it. The neocons were like, oh my God, this will be a catastrophic loss. And they're the ones that dragged us into it. And they're the ones that told us that, the Russians are going to win. And I think there's a method to Trump's madness, not to defend Trump that I like him or hate him. He's representative of this, of a crooked, broken stick system. But I think Trump's repeated defense of himself by saying, this is Biden's war. It wouldn't have happened if it was me. This was stupid. It shouldn't have happened. Yes, in a way, it's kind of futile because you're the president and it's your war now. But I will say this. I think it does in some ways, maybe not. I think at least it's an attempt by Trump to inoculate himself from the fallout of the final outcome. Trump has said he knows the Russians are going to win. Well, yeah, of course. That's what we're told, that Trump has said, hey, the Russians are going to win. Well, you know what? In other breaking news, fire is still hot and ice is still cold. Okay. Yes, the Russians are going to win. But I do think that Trump is kind of setting up for when the catastrophe happens, when the Ukraine conflict falls, that Trump is setting himself up. So when the people who were so wedded to it, it's ours, we're going to do it, we're going to beat it. I think Trump is setting himself up to give himself, to be able to do a little bit of I told you so. I think Trump's move will be, this is mine, it wasn't mine, it shouldn't have happened, I don't want it to ever happen, doggone it, I can't make it work out. But I think his plan ultimately, when this thing falls apart, is to say, it's all Biden. How much it'll work, I don't know. It'll work with some people. But that's all he's got. That's all Trump has. Catastrophe is coming. And I think when the catastrophe comes, and I think this is the other part of it, as the catastrophe looms of a loss to Russia, when the neocons come to Trump and say, we must act, whatever, we must fight the Russians and all die in a nuclear hailstorm, right? I think Trump is setting himself up in some ways when they say, we got to act now, the Russians are winning. I think Trump is setting himself up in a lot of ways by continuing to divorce himself from this war, by disassociating himself. In the short run, it may seem like it's nothing that matters. Come on, Trump, you are the president. But in the long run, when they push him to do something over the top, yes, we've got to fire missiles at Russia, whatever, right? We got to send troops. I think Trump is kind of set up to say, I said, this is not mine. I said, this is a mistake. You guys screwed up. I think he's setting himself up so that he won't have to take the ultimate fall by going into World War III against Russia. So as much as his attempts to disassociate himself from this thing and blame it and blame the whole thing on Biden isn't really hitting home in the short run, I think there's a long-term vision here. And the long-term vision is when it finally does go bad, it's going to be easier, since all along I've been saying it ain't mine, it's Biden's, it was a mistake, it never should have happened. Then when somebody say you should jump into it now, then Trump will be able to say, but I've told you all along it ain't mine and I don't really want it. So let's see what happens. I don't know for sure. I'm just guessing. But I think Trump is kind of setting himself up. God only knows Trump got a lot of problems. Epstein, Trump's got problems. Trump's got Israel, Epstein, he's got big problems. And economics, you name it, and some he's making worse himself. Most of them, I would argue. But at any rate, so I think what we're seeing, so let's get back to Ukraine, to the battlefield. In the same way that I was saying, a boxer tries to get points until he sees his opponent get weak, then he jumps on his opponent and he tries to take him out, because he's on the ropes. I think that's kind of where we're getting with the Russians, wherein they worked a long, slow attrition war, right? And then every time they got an advantage, okay, they're making more drones, they'll use more drones. They got a little bit more, I think, intel inside of Ukraine. They're hitting some more spots. I think they're getting a little wiser in the PR war. I mean, think about it. Part of the public relations war clearly was to say, yes, we're blowing up these recruitment spots, and then to say, because the people in Ukraine are giving us the info because they don't want to be recruited. Well, whether that's true or not, maybe yes, it is. Maybe yes, no, it isn't. But it was a propaganda move, and it seemed like a pretty good one, actually. Seemed like seems like they got some mileage out of that one, whether it was true or false. But now, as the Ukrainians start to run short of ammo, I talked about this a few weeks back. Let's just say I have enough ammo left for 6 weeks. But enough ammo for 6 weeks depends upon my enemy. If my enemy attacks me at the 50% level, of their capabilities, it'll last me for 6 weeks. But if they go up to 25% to 75% of their capabilities attacking me, it may last for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. If they go up to 100%, it may last for 3 or 4 days. So how long the equipment that they have lasts depends on the level of attack they're facing on a daily basis. And I think what the Russians are doing now is recognizing they're running short of everything. Their politics are unstable. Their finances are unstable. They're now basically their country's in default. Their backers are unstable. Merits now, what is it? 56% of the people are unhappy with Merits. Merits is doing a lot of talking about what he's going to do to Russia. Oh, Russia's going to get it. We're going to take Russia out. We're going to do Storm Shadow. But at home, he's skating on thin ice. He's only been in there a few months, and the people are already like, screw you, man. You suck. Starmer, things ain't looking good for him. Macron, under 20%. Macron has fallen under 20% approval rating. So the Russians also see that the strength, the support of their adversarial leaders, that's weakening. So they got less money to give because people are unhappy at home. So people are like, don't give money to Ukraine. They got less money to give from Europe. They got less weapons to give because they're running out. The U.S. has less weapons to give because it's got a war in Israel that it's supporting and a war in Ukraine. And our military industrial complex can't produce the stuff as fast as it's needed to support these two wars. And the Ukrainians are being weakened. The Russians, day after day, are weakened. Some of very significant areas. Towns and entrenchment areas and etc. So I think what the Russians are doing now is, as they see the Ukrainians on the rope, they're going to come in and start throwing flurries. They're going to push them to exhaust them. They're going to try to outpoint them for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 rounds. But now that the Ukrainians are starting to get short of men and women, sadly, they're starting to get short of ammo. They're starting to get short of physical support, short of political support, short of financial support. Now the Russians are going to push. Now you got them on the ropes. They're weak. They're disoriented. Boom. The Russians are. My understanding of what's happening now is that the Russians all across the front, in all areas, everywhere they can, they're putting heat on them. They're coming. They're bombing. They're attacked. They're pushing. They're moving forward. And the Ukrainians are now back on their heels. But think about it. To some extent, they have to conserve their ammo. But can you conserve ammo if you're being attacked in a defensive position? How much longer can they do this? And if you think about this, I think we're seeing a similar situation to the Iran conflict, wherein it was only 12 days. After 12 days, the U.S. and Israel had to tap out. They won't admit it. But after 12 days, we are now hearing things such as they were a day or two from being completely out of everything there. Now, add this. These ships in the area, in the region, right? The U.S. ships in the region that have, a limited amount of air defense missiles. You can't bring a ship alongside them and load them back up with air defense missiles. They have to go to certain ports that have the capabilities and the equipment to do that. They go to the ports, and the port has certain equipment at that port that then loads the missiles on, and they can go back out to sea. But because the Iranians were firing every day, they didn't have a chance to go off station. They didn't have a chance. They're out there, they're defending. They didn't have time to go into another port somewhere. That would have took days and days and days. They had to stay on station. They were running out. They were hours, if not days, away from Israel being completely naked. And then Iran could have fired any and everything they wanted all day and night. My point is, I think we're getting to that point with Ukraine, where Ukraine's air defense is nearing nakedness, and if it's not naked, it will soon be there. And I think because of the drone situation, effectively it is. Effectively, they can't. Ukrainians cannot protect themselves from the barrage of bombs coming from Russia, and as Russia completely obliterates Ukraine's um, air defense system, as it completely falls apart, as it completely runs out of missiles, what's going to happen? The Russians are going to be able to fly bombers night and day, big ones, old school, Tupolos or whatever the hell they are, the big ones, right? They're going to be able to fly their equivalent of B-52s, because once there's no air defense, what the hell? And they're going to be able to fly these big, slow bombers over Ukrainian positions and just carpet bomb them. That's what's coming. That's the direction we're going in. And I think the West is trying to, sell some wolf tickets. They're like, yes, we could take Kaliningrad in a second. And Russians will be like, you make screw with you, Kaliningrad, we'll nuke you. Right. And they're like, yeah, but it's a small area and it's inside of Europe. We could take that. And Russians like, yeah, you could take a nuke too, because that's what you'll get. So but I think they're bluffing. They ain't planning on attacking Kaliningrad. First of all, I don't even think the West has the equipment they need to attack Kaliningrad, much less anywhere else. And that's right next to the Russian border. I'm sure the Russians have massive amount of troops on that border, and Kaliningrad is armed to the teeth. And the Russians would really, if you start attacking, I wouldn't want to be in that group of soldiers or in that armored column or whatever that says they're going to attack Kaliningrad, because you are going to get hit with missiles and everything else. And if you get close enough, you'll get nuked. Let's not forget, the Russians have nukes that are in mortars. They have mortars that have tactical nukes. They have very small things that have tactical nukes. So they can give it to you pretty quickly and painfully. And if you are attacking Russian territory, the likelihood is that really bad things are going to happen. But I think it's a bluff. I think it's a bluff because they know they're in trouble. And I think what we're going to see is more and more bluffs as they realize Ukraine's in trouble. And I think we are rapidly approaching the point where Ukraine's going to have to bite the bullet. They're going to have to give up. They're going to have to run for it. They're going to have to try to, and making a deal is not an option, because that is just not the way things are going to work. But I've said this, and Scott says, I don't know about that. I don't know if they'll do that. That's kind of brutal. But I've said, I think the Russians, once they unseat the Ukrainian soldiers from their positions in eastern Ukraine, and those Ukrainian soldiers start to head for the river so they can cross the river on the bridges and go to the west, I think the Russians are going to blow those bridges up. Maybe I'm wrong. Remember that I said this. I think the Russians are going to blow those bridges up. And I think when the Ukrainian, at the last minute, and the Ukrainians are going to get there and they're going to try to cross the bridge, there ain't going to be no bridges, and they're going to be caught out in the open, and it's not going to be a good situation. In my opinion, the Russians will annihilate the Ukrainian army. And let me put it to you like this. There are a lot of people that don't think they will annihilate, that they'll give them a break. If you understand what happened, how we got here, that's exactly how we got here. The Russians gave them a break. The Ukrainian resistance fighters surrounded, I think it was 30,000. It was effectively what was the Ukrainian army. And my understanding was about 30,000 of them. And they were surrounded, and they could have been annihilated. And what's her name? The German Chancellor Merkel flew to Moscow and said, "Oh, please give them a break. Don't annihilate them." And then along came the Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. And so because the Russians showed mercy, or, not the Russians per se, but it was the Donbass militias, which I would think were probably armed and helped by the Russians, because they showed mercy, that gave the West, NATO, the opportunity to rearm and come back and get them. I don't think they're going to show mercy a second time. I just don't believe they'll show mercy a second time. I think that the second time around, if they get tens and tens and tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers running for the bridge, I think they'll blow the bridge, and I think they'll annihilate the Ukrainian army. I think that's what they will do. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm saying this. I'm a nice guy. I do not believe in war. I do not believe in violence, hurting other people. But if I am the president of Russia, looking at a historical context and say, last time we had them surrounded and you begged us to let them go and we let them go. And look what you did to us in return. This time you can, hey, Prime Minister Nixonov, yes, we'd like to strike a deal with the Ukrainian soldiers. I'll call you in a couple hours. Click. Ain't going to be no deals. So I think because, and here's the reason why I think there won't be any deals. Because if that Ukrainian army exists, it can be weaponized and will be weaponized to come back against the Russians again, if it exists. There's no question about it. You know that. If there's 50,000 Ukrainians, 100,000 Ukrainians running for the border, running for the river, they cross the river, or let's say they get to the river and the Russians make a deal and the Russians say, okay, we won't kill them. And they cross the river. What do you think they're going to do? The West is going to arm them and they're going to say Putin's evil, blah, blah, blah. They're going to arm them all up and say, now cross back over the river and attack the Russians. Can I let that happen if I'm in charge of Russia? No, I really can't. There is only one way, that those soldiers don't come back across the river to attack me again. And I think we know what that way is. And I suspect we're going to see that kind of an ending. But we will see. I do want to, before I go, I guess I didn't put it in there. So bottom line is, the other thing is this. The other thing is, I think that we're seeing the instability of not just, let me put it this way. I said the Zelensky government is unstable, but here's the reality. It is a reflection of its masters. The puppet masters are unstable. The puppet ain't gonna be so stable. The organ grinder's unstable. The monkey ain't gonna be stable, right? The fact of the matter is, if you look at Trump, right now, he's taking heat. And he's taking heat over this Epstein thing. And, he said he was going to, Trump said he was going to release the Epstein papers. There was never a chance he could release the Epstein papers, the Epstein list. There was never a chance that could be happened, but he lied and said he was going to. Probably, no doubt, knew he wasn't when he said it, but he didn't care because he figured I'll get out of it. So he makes this move. Oh, yeah, we're going to let go of the Epstein list. Nah, no, he couldn't. He brings in Cash Patel. He brings in Bongino. These guys talked a lot of crap. Oh, yeah, we get in, things are going to be different, and we're going to stand up, and we're going to tell the truth. No, you're not. You have no power. We understand that you're not the power, that you work for the power. And the issue is not about senators and members of Congress and stuff like that, people like that are on the Epstein list. Their masters are on the Epstein list. The people who paid the money to get them in the Senate and in the House and whatever position they are. Those people are on the Epstein list. So if the puppet masters are on the Epstein list, the puppets can't let them be on. They can't let them, put it out. So I even suspect now, my guess is all this talk of Ghislaine Maxwell, they interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell. Well, we're going to get the interview. The interview for Ghislaine Maxwell says there's no list. Trump ain't on the list. Nobody's on the list. She came out and we said, what about the Epstein list? And she said, there is none. Okay. In that case, she's been so good that we'll give her a full pardon. I mean, that's what the only thing they're going to use this is to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. That's what they're going to use it for. Number one. Number two, it ain't about a list. It ain't about a list. There's so much more to this than just a list. It is about, this is an Israeli pedophilia operation for blackmail. That the Israel and the US and whoever else, probably MI6, no doubt, were trafficking child. Now, when people out here on the net said, yeah, they were a bunch of pedophiles, everybody was like, you guys are crazy. You guys are a bunch of stupid conspiracy theories, calling these rich people pedophiles and saying they've got pedophile networks. That's mad. That's insane. No, it looks like it wasn't so mad and insane. Isn't that what they said about the people who didn't believe the JFK story? Isn't that what they said again about the people who said, hey, something fishy about 9/11? Whenever the government, something happens and people say, hey, I don't think that story makes sense, you're a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists. So everybody that said, hey, these people there's some pedophilia afoot. Oh, no, you stupid, crazy conspiracy theorist, building 7 conspiracy theorists. Well, it's out. And all they can do is go to their next lie. That's their only option. What are they going to say? Tell the truth about Jamie Dimon and who knows who else? No. They'll go on to their next lie. And it is hurting Trump bad. And there's nothing Trump can do about it. In fact, it could be Trump's demise. They could get to the point where they say, well, the only way out of this is we'll have to get rid of Trump and we'll put JD Vance in charge. But they got a problem because it ain't going to stop. Even the people under are going to say, JD Vance, Trump's gone. He wouldn't do what he promised. Now we expect you to do it. And they can't. JD Vance can't. Trump couldn't. Biden didn't for 4 years. The Democrats, hey, look at Trump. He won't let me release the list. Well, Biden was in, this happened in 2019. Biden 4 straight years and Biden couldn't release it. But for some reason, he's mad at Trump. Makes no sense. They can't. Because their masters are on the list. And I would be willing to bet you this. Epstein Island was a a sex blackmail operation, including child trafficking, human trafficking, sexual trafficking, prostitution, you name it, right? Probably murder, everything you can think of, extortion, blackmail. It was a criminal operation of epic proportions. But I'll guarantee you this, on Epstein Island, there was other meetings that they had business meetings. You know how you'll have like these groups like the Club of Rome or the with the various international organizations and groups, right? I will guarantee you that on Epstein Island, they were having those kind of meetings, that they were having foreign policy meetings, WEF type meetings, World Economic Forum type meetings. They were having economic meetings. I will guarantee you that on that island, there wasn't only sex going on, that there was actual international policy being created, driven, discussed. So there was a lot more. Here's the truth about Epstein. A big part and the most unthinkably horrible part of the Epstein conflict was the pedophilia, child sex trafficking, all that kind of stuff, underage girls, whatever. That was a big part of it. But if you understand these people like I understand them, that wasn't the only part of it. They were the kind of discussions that they couldn't have out in the open about, yes, what are we going to do about Russia? Well, here's the plan. We're going to start a war with them, and then Putin's going to fall. Then let's decide how we divide Russia up. Okay, you get this part, you get the oil, you get the gas. No, we're the US, we're taking the oil and the gas. Okay, fair enough. You get the nickel, you get the coal. What about the timber? I want the timber. All right, France, you can have the timber. I'm guaranteed they were having those kinds of meetings on Epstein Island of what they do next. And so the Epstein group was, the pedophilia part was a big part of it, maybe not even the biggest part, but a necessary part, because they had all of these meetings. And then if you thought that you might talk, or if you thought you might, if they were concerned that anybody might rat them out or something like that, guess what? They wouldn't, because they also had all of these other sexual things going on. And Trump was a rich man and a powerful man, and he had to be involved in some of it, probably the discussions and things like that, but also the sexual stuff too. They go there, we're going to meet all day. And in the evening, they'd probably say, all right, now pick a young girl, or God forbid, young boy, whatever. You pick them, and they go back to your room for sex or whatever. And of course, there's cameras and everything, and video, audio, tape, whatever. So they have the meetings, and then to make sure that nobody talks, they have all the sexual escapades. I guarantee it. We're only talking about the sexual part, but there was a lot more to it than that. There was a lot more going on than that. And now where we are is this. Let's on the way out. Yeah, and somebody put Israel was a sanctuary for pedophiles and a lot of other types of criminals. It was a criminal sanctuary. In the same way, think about this. You know, when you look at some of these islands, nations where like the billionaires take their money and they put it in whatever island, you know, some Caribbean island or Cyprus or whatever the hell, some, you know, the Isle of Man and Jersey or Guernsey or whatever the name of that island is, these various islands, little teeny islands, and they'll have like some banking laws where the you know, there's no taxes, no nothing. They won't tell who owns it. Okay, and all of these billionaires and corporations put their money in these little islands, right? So that way you can't trace their money and they don't have to pay taxes anymore. And these islands, if you look at them, they're always one thing. They're almost always islands that were former British colonial outposts. And then now the British, rather, they'll say we're not in charge of that island anymore, but they got some puppet leader in charge. They're still in charge of the island. They're still in charge of the island, right? They've got some colonial puppet who they've got in charge. And so now they pretend like they're in charge of that island because like they're not in charge of the island. Excuse me. They pretend like we're not in charge of this island. We don't know. This island can do anything they want. And it just so happens this island has decided that all of these British billionaires can come over there and park their money and now they'll never have to pay any taxes. So just coincidence. But hey, it's an island. They can do what they want. No, that's not the truth. The truth of it is those islands are still owned by British and they use them specifically so they can have the appearance that it's an independent island, but it ain't independent. It is a place for money laundering. Israel is that too. Israel is that, a place where they can hide criminals. Well, let me ask you this. You might not know this. When Epstein was in Florida and he got caught, you know, the first time, and they were working out a deal as to what was going to happen to Epstein, right? So he got caught with the child trafficking in Florida, caught, whatever that means. And they started looking into it and they were deciding what kind of a deal he was going to get. Do you know what Jeffrey Epstein did? He fled to Israel. He fled to Israel. He went to Israel. And while he was in Israel, his law firm, now something you might find interesting, his law firm was a law firm, and one of the interesting guy worked there, Bill Barr. Bill Barr was the same attorney general who handled the Epstein case. Isn't it interesting that when the Epstein case was in front of the federal government, they brought in Bill Barr as the attorney general to handle that and amongst other things, but mainly that. The guy who was at the law firm defending Epstein became attorney general and was in charge of the Epstein case and spoke with Epstein a couple days before Epstein's suicide. Maybe he told him, dude, this is your last chance. You're going to do what we want you to do. You're going to keep your mouth shut. No. Then we'll either kill you, possibly, or possibly they didn't kill Epstein. It's possible that Epstein's on another kind of Epstein island, which would be Israel. Israel is effectively, in some ways, the way they are always shipping pedophiles out there. You can argue that it's a form of an Epstein island, right? So we don't know. We think Epstein's dead. I suspect he's dead, but I don't know anything 100%. Number one. But my point is, isn't it interesting that when Epstein was awaiting the outcome of his Florida case, he fled to Israel? And then when he got a sweetheart deal, he came back. You see, my dear friends, if something went bad and he hadn't got that sweetheart deal, he wasn't coming back. And when he ostensibly committed suicide, perhaps he committed suicide and fled to Israel. We don't know. Ghislaine Maxwell, is she really in jail? I find it hard to believe. They claim she's in jail. But she's an Israeli spy. That ain't the way they do things. You know, perhaps they bring her in yes, she's going to prison. They bring her in a door. She's going to be in solitary confinement and then whatever. And then right out the back door and off she goes to Israel or wherever she is. She's probably in Israel. She was an Israeli spy. Why wouldn't she be? And so now what we have is, before I leave, what we have is an interesting situation. I don't see how Israel wiggles their way out of this one. And I don't mean that they'll be held accountable, because as far as the U.S.'s empire is concerned, they could care less. As far as the ruling elite's concerned, they could care less what we want, what we don't want, whatever. It don't matter to us. We ain't getting it. This is not a democracy. Don't fool yourself. But the people ain't going to back off. The story is not going to die. And what we have is this: the United States and Israel raping children, pedophilia, transporting them for sex around the world, and now a genocide where they're starving children to death and blowing them to pieces and killing them along with their parents. Think about what we got here. Starving children to death. What kind of people do this? Starve children to death. Drop bombs on them, blow them to pieces, and burn them alive. Literally, we've seen pictures of incubators where all of the babies in the incubators in the hospitals, premature babies, dead, every one of them. Drop bombs on refugees in tents. Refugees in tents. Drop bombs, burn them alive. Put out food. And when the people come in, hey, there's food and water. Oh, you see people starving. There's food and water over there. Go get the food and water. And when the people go for the food and water, they open up with machine guns. This is the United States government. And this is the Israeli government. How do you go from that to, all right, well, that's over. Let's go back to normal. Wait a minute. You know, it's like this. And we've all had that, where we've been around someone and they've done something where you just said to yourself, oh my God, I can't be friends with this person anymore, right? Imagine you're hanging out with your buddy and, you know, you're like, hey, well, we're going to go fishing. And he says, oh, let's stop by my house first because I got to get my favorite fishing rod. All right. Sounds like a good idea. And you stop by his house and you're in the garage and he's like, I can't find my fishing rod. Honey, have you seen my fishing rod? And his wife comes walking in. And she goes, I haven't seen it. And he says, you're lying, bitch, and slaps her down to the ground. You'd be like, holy crap, this guy just slapped his wife. He's an abusive human being. He called her a name and he slapped her right in front of me. Let's face it, that fishing trip's over. He's not my friend anymore. I'm not hanging out with this person anymore. I have now seen a crime of moral turpitude that is on a level that says you can't associate with people like that ever. I don't want anything to do with people like that, right? Here's my point. My government is involved in things that would make that look like a nice day. My government, need I go over it again? My government is involved in the rape, the murder, the starvation, the trafficking, the genociding of children and men and women and babies, and bragging about it and continuing to do it. And if that ain't bad enough, they said, yeah, there's some raping of children's going on. We'll let you know who did it. I promise. And some people believed them. I'm like, I'll believe it when I see it. So then the people are like, well, okay, government, you promised us. Granted, you're still committing a genocide. That's bad news. But you did promise us, you tell us who was involved you would give us the list of people. You would tell us who it was. And the government would say, yeah, I kind of really did promise that, didn't I? Yes, you did. No, I'm not. Okay, promised it. Fair enough. But just the list doesn't exist or something, whatever. See, when Trump says the list doesn't exist, what he's really saying is, whatever, you ain't getting it. That's just it. If the list don't exist, doesn't exist, whatever you want to think. The answer is no. Yeah, I told you I was going to give it to you. No, I'm not going to give it to you. That's all it is. Yes, I told you that, but I'm not going to do it. Stuck on that, buddy. What are you going to do? I'm the president. You ain't. And if I do it, I won't be the president either because they'll kill me. It's not that President Trump won't. Sure, he won't. It's that he can't. He doesn't have the power or authority. If Trump was to go on TV and say, "I've made a decision, I'm releasing it. When I get off the air, I'm going to go meet with the CIA and these people and say, and FBI and all, say, I want that list. I want the names of every single person who was implicated, and I'm going to read it online. And I'm going to do that at 8 p.m. tonight. He'd be deaded by 7 p.m. 6:59. Oh, we've got bad news about President Trump. Seems to have had a heart attack, and we decided to cremate the body. I mean, no, let's just wait till the last minute. He died an hour ago, so we had to cremate the body. And here's JD Vance. JD Vance, what do you think about the Epstein list, huh? Are you going to release it? No, it's Vance to be like this. No, Epstein, never heard the name before. No, buddy, I am not releasing a damn thing. I'm not saying anything. I don't know nothing about birth of no babies. Count me out. That's the way it would work. I'm mad at Trump. First of all, do I expect him to tell the truth? He made a promise that he wasn't going to keep. Whoa, what a shock. A politician made a promise and didn't keep it. I don't know. How about we start with the Democrats? Did Joe Biden say, hey, I'm going to do free community college? Oh, wait a minute. We need to fix Obamacare. How about we do a public option? I got an idea. We're going to do a $20 minimum wage. And he did none of them. As soon as he got in power, everything he promised was, you know what he said? I would, guys, but the Senate parliamentarian overruled me. This is literally. He literally said that to Democrats. Hey, you're the president. I know, but I mean, come on. The Senate parliamentarian, that's real power there, dude. I would do some of these things if I could, but the Senate I called the Senate parliamentarian and I said, hey, what about free community college? We can afford that. We help a lot of poor people. Senate parliamentarian said, shut the hell up. I ain't getting it. So what am I going to do? I'm only the president. That's where we are. So let me ask you this. What's the difference between Joe Biden saying he was overruled by the Senate parliamentarian and Trump saying there is no Epstein list? It's virtually the same thing. It's shut the hell up. I ain't doing it. I can't do it. They'd kill me if I would. I don't really care because I'm the president. It's too late. I already got your votes. And money's coming my way, power, women, whatever I want. Of course, in Joe Biden's age, I'm sure the whole women thing is way past him. Sure, he ain't there no more. I don't think they make enough Viagra in the world. That guy was like this. Here's Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden. So let's face it. I mean, I'm sure the women thing really wasn't working for him. But the bottom line is this. Trump could have, you know what? Here's what Trump should have did. When they said, hey, Trump, are you going to release the Epstein list? Well, you know what Trump should have said? I would, but the Senate parliamentarian overruled me. And if they said, what are you talking about? Hell, it was good enough for Joe Biden. It's good enough for me. There you go. Trump can't release the names on the Epstein list because he's been overruled by the Senate parliamentarian. What the hell? Go for it, Trump. I don't care. I know you can't. And that's where we are. We are now, we were already there, but we know it now. I think that's a good thing. You know what I mean? I think it's a good thing that you know that your government is genocidal, child raping, child trafficking, lying scumbags. Sadly, there's some people that still believe them, right? There's some people that are like, yes, I think Russiagate was true. So you think your government's telling you the truth? Yeah, when it comes to that. What about, I think they told us the truth about COVID. In fact, I think during COVID, I think the government was just trying to protect us and look out for our health. They were only trying to do the right thing. At the same time, they were involved in pedophilia and child rape. And of course, they are pretty good with genocide. But I really think that during COVID, they were trying to do the right thing and they were looking out for us. They were telling the truth as best they could. Did they make a few errors? Fair enough. They're only human. But no, they were lying. They always lie. They were going to make as much money as they can for them and their friends, and they could give a crap less about us. During COVID, if you were to say, hey, I think this thing was cooked up in a lab, you'd be thrown off of YouTube, Twitter, Smitter, Fritter, everything else. And when it's all over, they're like, I think this thing, we're the government, and we think this thing was cooked up in a lab. You think you cooked it up in a lab? And it wasn't in China. It was in Fort Detrick. Go to my Substack, and I got a video in there where I show you the links, and I give you the links to show you it came from Fort Detrick. But at any rate, I think that's it. Thanks a lot, you all. Have a wonderful day. If you are able to, a couple of things before I go. I did an earlier show that I had earlier, and that was on Russiagate, and it was Bill Binney, former technical director for NSA, and Ray McGovern, and it was fantastic. Oh my God, nothing will ever take Russiagate apart like that show. It was from, of course, Consortium News, CN Live. So if you get a chance, watch that. Number one. Number two, if you can, follow me on Rockfin and Rumble and Telegram and things of that nature. Become a Patreon member. If you can donate on PayPal, buy me a coffee is always a good option for donation, Cash App, you name it, if you can afford it. Follow me on Substack for sure. And I got a P.O. box if you want to send something. That's great. If you want to send a letter, or guess what? Thanks a lot to my buddy. If you want to send this is, I promised him that I would hold up his patch from where he retired. So there's his patch. He mailed that to me at P.O. Box 32, Glen Burnie, Maryland. It's right at the end. So if you want to do that, why don't you, if you want to email me something to hold up during the show, I would be happy to do it. Thanks a lot, everybody. The most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. I'm out.